Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to yet another investor briefing today. We'll be sharing our top stick picks at the end of this week, so please be sure to stick around until the end of the program. But before we jump right into the company profile, let's take a look at a short feature on Wigton Wind Farm.
Wigton didn't build the largest wind farm in the English-speaking Caribbean overnight. It required detailed planning, forging partnerships locally and overseas, digging kilometers of trenches, laying tons of steel, and pouring thousands of cubic meters of cement. And today, 44 wind turbines majestically stand on Wigton Wind Farm in Rose Hill, Manchester, a renewable energy plant that can power over 82,000 homes. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future.
Welcome back. Wigton Wind Farm was incorporated on April 12, 2000 and operates a wind farm in Rose Hill, Manchester, consisting of 44 wind turbines, as you just saw in that ad. It was a wholly owned subsidiary back then of PCJ, the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica, in order to develop and operate the wind-powered renewable energy systems in Jamaica, which supplied electricity to the JPS. On May 22, 2019, the company was listed on the Jamaica stock market's main market. And today, we're going to have Earl Barrett, CEO or Managing Director of Wigton, joining us. Speaking of the main market and the Jamaica Stock Exchange, if you're looking to expand your portfolio or embark for your very first investment journey, Mayberry can place you on that track to financial freedom. Visit our website to learn how you can become a shareholder of Wigton Wind Farm or any other company of your choice on the Jamaica stock market. Back to today's guest. Today's guest is an engineer who has over 40 years of experience in the bauxite, cement, and renewable energies industry. His name is Earl Barrett, and he spent the last 2 decades as at the senior management level, working with entities across the Caribbean. He served as general manager for Wigton Wind Farm for the last 10 years and was appointed to the post of managing director on January 2020. Since then, he has piloted the company through a decade of growth and expansion, as well as a highly successful IPO or initial public offering on the stock exchange. He's a life member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineering, IEEE, and a past chairman of the Electrical Engineering Practices Committee of the Jamaica Bureau of Standards. Today, Earl will be joining us to give us an investor briefing on Wigton Wind Farm. Welcome, Earl.
Thank you, Dan.
And online we have with us our chairman, Christopher Berry. Welcome, Mr. Berry.
Hi, Dan.
And later on in the program, I think we may be joined by our CEO, Gary Parrott. Well, let's jump right into it. Earl, could you tell us a little bit about Wigton and the history of the company?
Dan, just to follow up on some of your introductory remarks, Wigton is 100% owned and operated by Jamaicans. The 3 plants we have in Rose Hill of 44 turbines were put in 3 phases. Phase 1 was done and commissioned in 2004 of 23 turbines rather, and Wigton Phase 2 of 9 2-megawatt turbines were put in 2010, and in 2016 was when we did Phase 3 of 12 2-megawatt turbines. The plant initially, if you have any knowledge of how the original manufacturers of these equipment operate, when they are installed, they ask for a minimum of 5 years of operation and maintenance so as to allow their suppliers to guarantee the equipment that was supplied. We took a look at it in 2010 and decided that the services they were providing, that Jamaicans, properly trained, could have done the job at significant savings. So from 2010, we have been on a path to Jamaicanize, for lack of a better phrase, the operations and maintenance of the plant. And to date, we feel fairly proud that we have been operating and maintaining the plants at a world-class standard. The availability ranks with other wind farms across the world, and added to what we did at Rose Hill, was that we installed a training lab. It's the only wind farm to date, as we speak, that has a training lab as part of its operation. How did the training lab come about? We looked around in Jamaica as we were seeking to employ engineers to operate the plant, and we saw that there was a paucity of skill set. And we figured that we could train Jamaicans to do that. So we looked across the world. We went to Canada, we went to Costa Rica, we went to Mexico to look at how some of the universities ran their renewable energy training program. And out of that, we were able to put up a world-class lab, which is recognized from North America to South America as being of a very high standard. Quite a number of the courses that we run there have been certified by the City and Guilds, which is a world-renowned training institution, and also our own local body, NCTVET. So persons that come for those training will leave not with a paper of participation, but a certificate of competence. We look on the training aspect of what we do as being almost as valuable as the cash we earn from selling energy to the grid. I want to emphasize that point because a lot of times what you find happen in developing countries like Jamaica is that we have become so accustomed to feeding at the table of North America and Europe. The moment we need somebody with some skill sets, we say, oh, we have to bring down a consultant. Wigton Wind Farm is proving not only to Jamaica, but the rest of the Caribbean, that we as a people, a CARICOM group of companies, of countries rather, are capable of producing the skills to manage, to operate just about any bit of equipment that man can conceive. So the complexity of the turbines, we are doing it just as good as the manufacturers. We had a case where one of the suppliers of the wind turbines had asked us to take on a warranty period for them when they were putting up a wind farm. And we only didn't go through with that contract because of some legality. So the skill is not just from us saying we can do it. Others have come and see how we have done it and are satisfied that we are at a world-class standard with them.
Excellent. So tell me, Earl, what approximately is the staff complement size of Wigton? And to make that point, how many of them are actually Jamaicans?
The staff complement total, which is the admin staff and engineers, technicians, managers, 27.
Excellent, excellent. And all Jamaicans?
All Jamaicans.
Excellent, that's impressive. Also, at the end of 2018, Wigton Wind Farm was among 9 companies who produce and supply electricity in Jamaica. You reported a contract capacity of approximately 6%. How has your market share increased since?
As of 2016, we have not increased our capacity. As you recognize, Dan and members of the audience, the industry we are in is regulated. So for as much as we have more than one project that we would say is at the stage of being shovel ready, that is, once you get the go-ahead, you could start digging to put in some new turbines. But the renewable energy industry and the energy industry in its totality in Jamaica is regulated by the government. So until there is a call by the government and the government procurement entity to say that there is the capacity on the grid for the addition of new energy, Wigton or any other independent power producer can't go put in engines or put in turbines and say, I have energy to sell to the grid. It has to be through a regulated process.
Understood, understood. So in that case, how do you guys maintain your competitive edge?
The competitive edge that we expect we will maintain is based on the skill sets that we have developed, based on the high level of availability that we have been able to maintain on our plants, that we could go to the market and be as competitive as any international player. Once we can acquire funds at comparable levels to the international players, nobody should come in and beat Wigton in putting up renewable energy.
I agree. After all, it is the largest wind farm in the Caribbean. Is that correct?
In the English-speaking
English-speaking Caribbean.
Yes.
And what's the total size? You mentioned the 3 phases.
It is 62.7 megawatts of installed capacity.
7 megawatts. That's pretty impressive for Jamaica. Mr. Berry, you have any questions, or is there anything that you find impressive about Wigton?
Yes, I am a great fan of Wigton. You know, we typically do research at Mayberry, and over 10 years ago, Wigton came up on our research radar as one of the companies that would be a long-term performer in Jamaica. And the rest is history. I have many questions, so let me just shoot my first one. My first one is, how serviceable is the original set of wind turbines that was installed? Are they obsolete? Are they current? When that contract runs off, is it likely that you will get another contract using those same turbines, or will you have to spend a lot of money to upgrade them? You know, a lot of people are not in the power business. They don't understand all of that. Can you shed some light on that for me, please?
Chris, you have asked a number of questions. Let me see if I can just put them in order, answer them in a fashion that will keep it flowing. The present set of turbines, when manufactured and sold to us, was given by the manufacturers that they have a 20-year lifespan. As you recognize with any piece of electromechanical equipment, when such a warranty is given, it is on the basis that they would have force-tested major components to see that they're capable of lasting that period of time. We are presently into the 16th year of those equipment being in operation. And if you check across the world, that vintage of turbines or technology is no longer in operation except in one other place. And it's not as many. I think they have about 6 or 8 of those turbines in operation. One of the things we can say about those turbines is that they were well built, because they have gone through 2 hurricanes. You know, one we got a hit, one was just a glancing blow, and they suffered minor damages. As a matter of fact, the wind turbines were ready to operate for weeks before JPS was able to restore the power lines to take the power, because there were minor damages. So as we speak now, we're able to maintain them with still above 90% availability. So there is not a panic there. But what we have to be doing, as with any electromechanical piece of equipment, that once you have gone past the half-life, which would be for us 10 years, you begin to do what is called planned obsolescence. So for as much as we have a contract that says it has the opportunity with the agreement with the then, when OER was responsible for calling for new equipment to be put on the grid, and for the JPS, which takes the power, that the contract says they should not reasonably object to an extension. But from Wigton's standpoint, we would not seek such an extension, because this is the period where the money you earn, you would spend it back on maintenance. Because once a piece of equipment is not being manufactured anymore, when you seek to get spare parts for it, it has to be specially manufactured. What that suggests to you, you're going to pay a premium price for it. So it's not off the shelf, it's not being kept in inventory. Have to place your orders long in advance because you anticipate a component is coming to the end of its useful life. And so you're going to run into paying out more than you're likely to earn if you should seek an extension. So we are now in dialogue with the relevant government agencies to plan that replacement, because I don't think you could fathom. I mean, Mayberry was a significant broker in this divestment of Wigton, and a number of the persons who bought shares were 43% were under 40. And even though it's over, I met a lot of persons who said we were buying this for our grandchildren because energy is going to be around as long as there's a modern economy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can't imagine a world. So just to help you viewers, that first phase is approximately 20.7 megawatts, and that 20-year power purchase agreement expires in May 2024, if my memory serves me right.
That's correct.
And so what we're talking about is their ability to repower that 20 megawatts. And I cannot imagine a world where Wigton would not be allowed to repower those 20 megawatts. I also happen to have 16 years of experience in the power sector, and I've seen no less than 3 power purchase agreements that were extended to facilitate such a thing, which included JPPC, JEP, and one other that slips me right now. Yeah. So I too imagine a world where that 20 megawatt will be repowered. What would you say roughly, Earl, is the cost roughly to repower that 20 megawatt plant, you would say?
Okay. Dan, prices are based on demand and supply.
Yes.
But just based on the numbers that we have worked with in the past, we would say just a little over 20 million US.
Something in the region of 20 million US.
Yes.
And completely coincidental, not related, didn't plan this at all. Wigton is a company that happens to have a lot of cash on its balance sheet. In fact, there are very few companies on the stock exchange, I can't think of 5, that could boast to having $3.5 billion cash on the balance sheet. So that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. Fourth question we had is the company currently has 3 plants, 44 wind turbines, and there are long-term plans. Are there long-term plans for local or regional expansion?
The answer to that is yes on both accounts. In the local market, based on the wind studies that we have done some years ago, there was the capacity for up to 250 megawatts of wind energy.
Yes.
Based on site locations. And we did some site studies years ago, still have the data. If we listen to the government, former Minister of Energy spoke about wanting to have as much as, I think it was the Prime Minister himself, 50% of the electrical energy coming from renewable sources.
Yes.
So in that respect, there is quite a capacity. Right now we're up to maybe 12 or 15%, depends on how you calculate it.
Right, right.
So there's, so we have shovel-ready projects. We did make a bid for a Wigton 4.
Yes.
When 8 Rivers came in with their very interesting number for their solar energy.
Yes.
We have set ourselves out, especially since being divested, to begin to look at regional electrical demand. Our training lab, as I mentioned earlier, have been offering training programs across the Caribbean and even to non-CARICOM countries. And so we have been positioning ourselves in other countries.
Right.
And if it was not for the advent of COVID-19, we were almost sure that we'd have been doing 1 or 2 other projects in other Caribbean regions. We still are pursuing them. We still are making ourselves prepared. So we have a project, at least 1 project shovel ready for Jamaica, and we have maybe 5 others across the Caribbean looking at.
Excellent. So long and short is, look out in 2021, folks. I think you're going to see Wigton spreading their wings and expanding. But let me ask the question, Earl. Can Wigton match or beat the 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour that we saw for wind? How do you feel about that?
We have spent quite a number of hours looking at how 8.5 cents could have come into the system at the time that it came in.
Yes.
There are a number of engineers, along with myself, have tried to do the reverse engineering, and we're still baffled.
It's a bit of a stretch.
Yes, so we don't want to use that as a benchmark. We are hoping that the government and those who are doing the assessment is not only looking at saying that figure was put at that time, can you come in and beat it? What we try to do is to look at what the market is saying. Wigton is a company that is seeking to have very competitive rates. So we always keep our pencil sharpened, and we will ensure that when the next bid is out in Jamaica, Wigton will be the winner.
Yeah, and another point about wind, which versus solar, that a lot of folks don't appreciate when we think about the grid and planning for the grid and that integrated resource plan. Solar is a very unreliable source of energy, and it's never going to be there for peak demand at night, and on average gives you maybe a 20 to 22% capacity factor, while wind generally gives you a much better level of reliability, has a much higher capacity factor, and actually does less damage to the grid. So one of the important things JPS is trying to figure out in terms of integrating renewables is energy storage to accommodate these variable sources. And generally speaking, solar gives more trouble to manage than wind. But having said that, although your name is Wigton Wind Farm, I don't think we should constrain ourselves to think of you as only being focused on wind going forward. Is that correct?
No, Dan, and you actually answered part of the question that I saw coming there. The capacity factor for wind in Jamaica averages about 32%.
Wow.
The capacity factor for solar will be anywhere from 14 to 19, and you're making a couple months of 21, 22.
Right, right.
When you look at where Jamaica was starting from, why Wigton started out with wind, we took the decision that you get the biggest bang for the buck going after the renewable that gives you the best output.
Correct.
For money spent.
Correct.
So wind was it. But Wigton was really set up as a renewable energy company. Mm-hmm. It was not set up to go solely for wind. Wind was just the first choice because we said it was available at a higher capacity factor. So we will always be looking at if there was more hydro would give you a better capacity factor.
Correct.
And if you get to waste energy and you can do the harnessing of the refuge properly, you get a higher capacity factor. So it is always best to look at not necessarily what's coming in cheapest, but when you put a megawatt on the grid or 10 megawatts, what are you getting? Are you getting 3.2 or are you getting 1.9?
Correct.
So those are some of the factors that we will take into consideration, not just in Jamaica, but the other countries we go to.
Absolutely. And speaking of other countries, are there any opportunities that the company has chosen to capitalize on during this environment?
In Jamaica, yes, we have been looking at a number of small projects. We have on our, project division, some 13 projects, of which at least 10 of them are actively making small movements every month. And so, because we're in a competitive environment, again, I won't say them here.
Right, right.
But because everybody may begin to go at the same thing.
Yes.
It will eventually come out, but certainly no business that is dependent on growth can afford to sit back on its laurels. And certainly Wigton is not that type of company.
I'm happy to hear that you're not sitting down on $3.5 billion of cash and doing nothing. It's great to hear you guys planning to expand. Chris, any thoughts from you or questions?
Yes, my next question. I don't know why I'm hearing this feedback because I don't have anything on. Anyway, my next question is, I think that Wigton has done a magnificent job of, when you look at the period of time you have been in business, you have had 2 expansions, you have trained so many people. I'm expecting Wigton to be a leader in Caribbean renewable energy. When can the shareholders look forward to seeing its Wigton being across the Caribbean as a energy supplier?
Chris, earlier Dan made the comment that shareholders and potential shareholders should get ready for 2021. I don't have a crystal ball, and so I'm always very hesitant. If you had asked me that and COVID was not around, I could give you a month. As it is now, we just had a brainstorming session among our senior managers, and I'm sure other companies are doing it, but we were talking about managing in an era of uncertainty. Because for every time we say this will be done, time required is 6 weeks, you get a little bit of fat on it and you say on the outside 7 weeks. and then you're looking at 3 months and you're still at the planning stage because you can't move to the next stage to make it be implementable. So we are more anxious than anybody out there asking that question along with yourself, Chris, that we be able to have a timeline to which we could say, not just to ourselves within Wigton, the Wigton family, that management and board, but certainly to our loyal shareholders. We are still have to pinch ourselves that our little company could have attracted 31,000 shareholders when we did that IPO. So we are even more pushed by that bit of information or that knowledge that we must look to building wealth for the shareholders.
No, but the specific question would be from me, are you guys actively pursuing opportunities outside of Jamaica?
And the answer to that is yes, in at least 3 territories across the Caribbean.
Well, congratulations, and I know you guys will always deliver, so that is good enough for me.
And I concur. In fact, I neglected to mention no conflict at all. I happen to be a board director of Wigton Wind Farm, and I'm committed to making sure that we use that $3.5 billion to either grow the business or pay some very healthy dividends. So you guys can count on that. Mr. Peart, I gather you're here with us. Would you happen to have a question, sir? Or a comment?
Yes, I actually have several questions. Good afternoon, Earl. It's always good to see you.
Good afternoon, Gary.
Afternoon, Dan, Chairman, the rest of social media out there. My first question to you is, Wigton is seen as a wind farm now, but should we truly look at it as an alternative energy business? And the question I'm asking is, if you happen to end up in other territories, are you only interested in setting up wind farms in other territories, or can you diversify into solar, hydro, etc.?
Gary, we are far advanced with that. We, as I earlier explained, that Wigton has the name wind farm attached to it, but it was really an energy business. And in this public space or publicly listed company that we are now situated, we certainly have been looking at other projects and energy in its totality, other businesses where energy is a component, where we can see synergies. And we're looking at that not just in Jamaica, but right across the Caribbean or the CARICOM territories. We hope to capitalize on some aspects of the CARICOM document that says preference should be given to CARICOM countries. And we are seriously setting in motion the engagement of the different institutions, the SICRI, the Caribbean Development Bank, the CARICOM Energy Secretariat out of Guyana. All of these entities have been engaged and have Wigton as a focal point. Right now, we are the thematic hub for wind for the SICRI and energy arm, which means that all the CARICOM countries will first come to Wigton when they're looking at energy projects to do with wind. So yes, we are diversifying, and yes, we will not confine ourselves to just wind farms.
So my second question, if you'd allow me, moderator, Dan. There's several investors that have asked the question, what should I expect from Wigton? So they've heard that there are all these opportunities, but when they look on the balance sheet, your balance sheet now has a lot of cash. Investors are saying, why can't we get more dividend? If we hypothesize, if tomorrow morning you get a deal for another wind farm, another solar farm, are we looking at an expansion of profit of 2 times, 3 times, 10 times? What should an investor expect?
Gary, your question coming from a straight financial standpoint, but let me try and sort of dampen the enthusiasm about the cash that we have. The industry we are in is very capital intensive. One of the downsides I would have said we saw with Wigton over the years is that we were heavily debt financed. So although there is cash there, we look at the option, should you pay down some debt and so your interest payment will be a little bit lower, but you balance that against the opportunity that when the next project comes, you're quite likely, outside of the repowering of Wigton 1, the next project we're looking at is going to require up to $50 million US. You would want to walk into such a project with quite a bit of equity rather than end up working for the bank.
Yes.
So we certainly want to hold on to a little bit of the cash as we look at the opportunities that's on the horizon. And it's just unfortunate that it keeps one step ahead of us because COVID has dampened everything that's happening in the Caribbean in the business sector. Well, the world for that matter. So the cash is needed. And we somehow have to be able to say to our shareholders, don't take it up front. You need to have a cushion to expand the business, and then your growth will be that much better in 4 or 5 years. So for the next year or so, we're not excited about divesting ourselves of the cash.
Right. So what you're basically, the message you're basically sending to the shareholder is they will make more money with Wigton keeping the cash and then ultimately finding another similar type investment where you'll get significantly greater growth and profits than if you got an increase in dividend.
That is correct. Couldn't have put it better.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gary. Much appreciate that. From my point of view, obviously, can't argue with that. What I love about Wigton is even this year where the results have fallen off a tad bit, and that's tied primarily to wind speed, we still see this business in the 9 months to September generating $1 billion of cash from operations. So that's pretty impressive. Speaking of wind speed, Earl, I mean, wind speed is the most critical element impacting your output. And we saw a little fall off, as I mentioned. So since this is variable and it's unpredictable, how do I say it? Since it's variable and unpredictable and uncontrollable, are there plans to pursue new business lines?
It is, Dan, I could have sworn I said it a couple of times that
Yes.
we are looking at
Yes, you probably have.
other businesses.
Yes.
We're well aware of that. We are a little bit concerned, just a tad concerned now what climate change seems to be doing.
Yes.
Because we're seeing some traditionally high months of wind turning up to be low. But we have seen this happen before. I recall back in 2009 when we saw a particular month, the production was half what it was for the prior 3 years. And there was consternation with all of us. We reached out even to the Met Office out in the UK because they have some global satellites that do a global view. And they came back with an explanation that you could have, if you had the right music, you could have had a #1 hit. In how convoluted the explanation was of what La Nina and El Nino and the upper troughs and the jet stream, all of what affected it. So we see from time to time those changes take place. The industry has weathered all of the climate changes maybe for the last 400 years. Wind turbines, windmills were around for as long as that. And it's still, in 2020, is an attractive business. So I think the little dips that we're seeing is not a panic mode. It's one for investigation from our standpoint.
Right, right.
But it was always our view, even when we were government, to see what other businesses we could have gone into outside of just straight putting up wind farms.
Wind alone. Great, good deal. And thanks. I see the questions coming in from social media. I really appreciate it. Let's go with the first one. First question. Have you considered or looked at the possibility of offshore wind?
We have, and we are in the process. There's a company out of New York. When we were part of the parent company, PCJ, which no longer is around, there's a company that we joined up with in collaboration with PCJ as the focal point to look at offshore, and some studies have already been carried out. One of the things I must say to the person who asked is that the continental shelf of Jamaica is very short. As you get offshore half a kilometer or less,
The water gets
the
very
water
deep.
gets very, very deep.
Very deep.
So what we have done this study on so far is near offshore.
Right.
And I can say the place that's been done down by Rocky Point, where if you know anything about that area, I know where the Jamaica has its shipping port, that most time of the year they have to use 2 and 3 barges to be able to dock their vessels.
Very rough.
Because the wind is just so high and the
Yeah.
sea so rough.
Yeah.
So we have taken some looks down there, and it's looking fairly attractive, but that is very in the infant stage.
Great, thanks for that. Next question comes in from Yannick Harvey, and well, I'm sorry, let me go to Randy Burgess. Can Wigton speak to its corporate social responsibility activities, particularly those around the environmental projects that you undertake?
Our social corporate responsibility has been focused in 3 main areas. And that will be changing, so let me say that up front. Now that we are having shareholders across the island, we will look across the island. Previous, we were concentrated in Rose Hill, South Manchester, where the plant is located, because what you find in any community you go to, you see it with the bauxite companies, the people around the bauxite companies saying, the owners are making money, the government may be collecting tax, but the roads in my community is bad. The water is bad, the dusting is bad. So we figure we would have concentrated. So we look at farming. So we help the farmers. We have, those farmers for years now have not complained too much about drought, because we have given them thousands of gallons of water, rehabilitate tanks that were there, allow them opportunity to be able to take the water off, properly secure them so kids couldn't go climb up and drown in them. We have looked at national security and in the area of crime fighting. So the police stations around us, we have looked to support, and also the schools. We have adopted a primary and infant school in close proximity to the plant, and there's also a high school, a Cross Keys High School, that we also seek to assist to see that the children are good. Just recently we gave tablets to the PEP students from the primary school, and we will continue to look at those issues. Once other communities reach out to us where it falls into those 3 categories, we will be more than willing to take a look at it. And of course, we can't give more than we have.
Got it.
And there's a budget also for that.
Coming to you in a second, Mr. Berry. One more from social media, from Chester Francis Jackson. Can wind be localized for individual domestic consumption, for home or for office use?
The answer is yes, and I say that with a little bit of caution. If you look around some buildings in Kingston and other parts of the country, over in Portmore, and I think I know of it down in St. Anne, once there's an appreciable amount of wind, you could put up a wind turbine. Putting up a wind farm, which meaning multiple turbines, would be a whole other issue.
Right.
Because you have to look at the economics of it. So you need to have, for Jamaica and for the maybe rest of the world, you seek to want to have a minimum of an average 8 meters per second of wind over the entire year.
Right.
It doesn't have to be there every day or every week, but for the average for the year,
That's
for
sort
it to
of
be economical.
The minimum
Yeah.
wind speed
Yeah.
viability.
But if you have consistent wind around your house, there are small wind turbines that you could use to supplement
Yeah.
taking from JPS or any other source of energy you have.
It's a shame, Earl, the videos don't do justice to the size of the wind turbines. Can you help us appreciate this last generation of turbines that you have versus the next generation that are out, how tall these things are, or how wide the wingspan is of a turbine?
Presently, we have wind turbines that are 37 meters in terms of the tower.
So that's over 100 feet tall.
Yes, and up to 130, with the blades span would be some 60, almost 70 meters as well.
Yeah.
And these are small.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so we have one, 900 kilowatts for the smaller turbines. The phase 2 and 3 are 2 megawatts or 2,000 kilowatts.
And the next phase you would
And the
do, you'd
next
probably
phase would
4
be
megawatt,
the
maybe?
4
Yeah.
megawatts, and they have wind turbines up to 8 megawatts now.
Correct, correct.
So they are becoming very large. And
Quite big.
what is beautiful about these is that the footprint is not proportionate to the size.
Yeah.
You almost, apart from what you call the lay-down area, where when you're putting up the turbine, you need a clear area to put the blades, so that when you offload them from the trailer, so that the cranes can lift them up.
Right.
So you need a wider space because the blades are longer.
Right.
But in terms of the actual footprint, if you say you needed 2 acres per turbine or 1.5 acres per turbine, it doesn't go up 3 times that when you take the size from 2 to 8.
Correct. So you could do a 4 megawatt installation easily
Almost in the same, yes.
on an
almost same
acre.
application, yes.
By comparison, solar will need 16 acres of land to do 4 megawatts, roughly speaking. Maybe 4 acres.
4 megawatts is 20 acres.
Yeah.
5 is 5
Yeah.
acres per megawatt.
Yep. So again, for a small island developing state, the energy intensity of wind really is significantly superior to solar.
Yes.
Just as an example. Mr. Berry, any questions from you before I go back to social media or over to Mr. Perrott afterwards?
I have a question here. So, seeing that you have paid off, your loans are now in Jamaican dollars, and your selling power, which is basically indexed to the US dollar, would you say that the revenues of Wigton are hedged against the valuation?
Chris, we are certainly in a better position from our financial statement. But I recall in the early days when we were literally panicking when the dollar was making drastic downward movements, that I sat with our external auditor, with fallen crest and asking what could we do. And the advice I got then was, you not need to worry unless you're selling the company, because it's not cash going out. If the dollar even change and you have to say this month you take a write down, the cash isn't going out of the company. The overall value of the company will be indexed differently because you have to pay off your debt in US while you have Jamaican dollars. So we're in a little better position when you look at it from a month to month. But overall, it's almost a flat surface in terms of whether you had the loan still in US or you now have the loan in Jamaican. So it's not anything that we look at big. When you look at the indexing of the rate, some months you end up a little bit better off, some months you'll be a little bit lower. What you have to bear in mind, Chris, is that all of our, well, let me say 99.9% of our spare parts have to be bought with US or euros or pounds. So in that respect, the balancing act is normally we end up on even keel.
But certainly it's good to see that you've reduced your effective rate of borrowing, because if now you're borrowing in Jamaican, at a particular rate, it's difficult when you're raising financing at maybe 6%, 7% US, but you have no clue as to what the average rate of devaluation will be over the life of the project. So I think
Right.
refinancing.
But if I can, Dan,
Yes, Gary.
just 2 questions, but one to respond to what Earl has just said. That point about no cash leaving, Earl, only matters as long as you haven't gotten to the maturity of the loan. The reality is that once you get to the maturity of the loan, all of those FX accounting adjustments become real in terms of you're going to have to find that cash to pay out that loan at that point. That's one. But the second and most important point for me, I'm always impressed when I hear you speak, Earl, because of the breadth and length of knowledge that you have in this space. And as somebody that has been at Wigton from the start, and you've carried it through different crises, and now where the sea is not as rough, you're managing the place. Talk to me about succession, because running a wind turbine business, running an alternative energy business is not something that is offered in a class in every university. I mean, you have garnered a lot of expertise, experience. But tell me about the rest of the business. Who is going to be the next Earl for Victor?
Chris, I hope there wouldn't be an next Earl. I always say to my staff that
Or Earlina then?
that one of the things I know certainly, certainly what I'd expect to happen that whoever comes after Earl will run the business better. A year after I arrived in the company, I think I was able to sit with the then chairman and earmark who would have been a likely successor from within the company. And that still holds for every board I've sat with since then. So I don't think there's a problem if I'm abducted by aliens tonight or I decide not to come back next week, that there would be much of a misstep within the company. I think there is enough persons from the management to the engineering level that would see a seamless transition. And the value that I bring is on the shoulders of a lot of smart people and fortunately young people who have a passion for the business. So Gary, I think Victor is in good hands, with or without Earl.
That's good to hear, sir.
Excellent. And last one for me. Earl, you shared intentions to tap into the market again for funds via a rights issue or an additional public offering. Is this something that you're still thinking about?
Dan, what we have sat, and certainly that's not a call that I make by myself. We have an investment and finance committee, and it is really their purview to guide that. And what we have discussed in that area is that certainly each project or each group of projects will be looked at in how best to finance them. So whether it's going back to the market, which we'll have to prepare the market for, or it's tapping into multilateral loans, which are likely to come to us at attractive interest rates, that call will be made at the time when the investment gets to that stage.
Right.
That money must be found.
Makes sense, makes sense. And the good thing about these development projects is you actually, it happens over, a good time frame. So in other words, between winning the bid and funding the project, I'm sure you'll have adequate time to do that.
Yes.
Great, thanks, I appreciate that. At this point in time in the program, folks, we go and look at the top picks. But just before our top picks, I think they have a playback for us. And this week, I would like to start with Gary, because I want to make sure he doesn't steal the chairman's idea. Gary, what's your top pick for this week?
The record shows that he's the one that takes my ideas. But anyway, my pick this week is Grace Kennedy.
Still signing the checks, my boy.
So my pick this week, Dan, is Grace Kennedy. And, I finally see where the market has started to respond. Full disclosure, Mayberry has a position in this company. I mean, I believe at this point, Earl, I believe Mayberry is, I think, the largest shareholder in Wigtown, if not close to the largest, if not number one, number two.
I think we're the number one.
As I said,
You're number one, Gary.
I'm number one. That sounds good, right? So in the case of Grace, what we've seen is that for many years, Grace has been trying to diversify its revenue and earn more income outside of Jamaica. The last set of financials, especially September 30 financials, show that finally they're making significant traction. And as I said before, they're a company that has a cash pile in excess of $30 billion. And I believe the CEO, Don Webby, seems to have finally convinced his board to allow him to spend some of it. So he has made some interesting acquisitions. And in the last investor briefing, he has alluded to more acquisitions, which will obviously help to push revenue and drive more profit. I think the company is one of the few companies which are undervalued relative to where the future of that business is. And that's my pick. And I think it's going to be a great pick.
I totally agree, Gary. I mean, there's no logic behind Grace Kennedy having a 10 times PE ratio in a main market with an average PE ratio is 14 times. So I think that stock's 30% undervalued. Really like it. I think they're going places. Great pick, Gary. Now, Mr. Berry, we'll go over to you. What's your top pick for this week?
Yes, Dan, my topic for this week is Wigton Wind Farm. Full disclosure, we have a big shareholding in Wigton. The reason I like Wigton is that the multiple pretty low. They have tremendous opportunity to expand in their existing line of business in Jamaica and across the Caribbean. They have a great management team. They have a great board. They have lots of cash on their balance sheet that they can use to fund future investments. And in the whole area of energy, there's quite a lot of international funders out there. So between the cash they have on the balance sheet and the international funding opportunities, I don't see them having a problem funding new transactions. It's all about whether they can win the transactions. And of course, I know Earl isn't going to take on any transactions which are not going to add to the bottom line. So I think the upside here is very strong, and energy requirement is not going away. People are going to need energy for a very long time to come. It's a stable earner. I love this stock, and we put over $1 billion into it. So Wigton, my pick.
I couldn't agree with you more, Chris. Again, when I work out that cash into price per cents, they have 27 cents of cash per share holding. You know what I mean? So the stock price is 72 cents. They're sitting on 27 cents in cash. Today, renewable energy is about 15% of the market, I would say, Earl. And the government has an objective to get to a minimum of 30% by 2020. That's 2030.
2030.
All right, 10 years away. That's almost impossible to do. That means adding 250 megawatts more of renewable to get to 30%. To get to 50%, it means adding 400 megawatts more of renewable energy. And here is the largest wind farm in the English-speaking Caribbean that's profitable, generating $1 billion of cash per year. How on earth are they not going to win significant projects going forward? So I totally agree with that. The growth potential of Wigton
But then if you look at it another way, right? If you take the 27 cents from the current stock price and you work the multiple based on the, you use that as a price.
It's like a 6 times
you get
PE
the
ratio.
multiple,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
you know,
I need to go buy some more Wigton tomorrow, now that you put it that way. Tomorrow. Great. And Mike.
Buy all day long.
Absolutely. And my
So 72 cents is cheap.
it definitely is. I think so. And my top pick for this week is JMMB. And I think they're showing it up on the screen there. Again, another company with a ridiculously low PE multiple, less than 10 times. This company is really just growing from strength to strength, really turning out good profits, still in a strong growth mode, strong leadership team. There's no doubt in my mind that at $31, $32, this stock price is a giveaway. Remember, they raised $14 billion at $38 a year ago, and they were substantially oversubscribed. They pulled down about $18 billion in total. So great company. My top pick for the week, but I like the other two just as well too, guys. Well, folks, hey, time's up. It was great, a lot of fun. Earl, it was great having you here. Chairman Barry, always a pleasure having you. And CEO Gary Pear, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
To our viewers out there, thank you for being a part of this month's Virtual Investor Forum, which is the last one in the series for this year. I'd like to thank our special guest, Mr. Earl Bard, for being with us today and for sharing with us about Wigton Wind Farm, which happened to be the chairman's top pick. We're certainly looking forward to the series going into 2021. Be sure to follow us on social media, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to keep following us on IG and other places. We really would like to thank you guys for watching a forum today, for being a part of this series. Happy holidays, everyone, when it comes. Keep safe. I'm saying that because, again, this is the last forum for the year. And remember, as you always say, Gary,
slow and steady wins the race.
Okay.
Goodbye, everyone.
Right. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Earl. Thanks, everyone.
Wigton Wind Farm is more than a premier supplier of wind energy. At Wigton's state-of-the-art renewable energy lab, energy professionals, academics, and tertiary students are trained in a range of subjects, such as photovoltaic technologies, wind, small-scale hydro, and bioenergy. And these students will become forerunners in the sector and aid its continued expansion. Wigton Wind Farm, working to secure Jamaica's future. The financial and environmental costs of oil can be high. The clean energy generated at Wigton Wind Farm reduces the need for fuel imported by 96,000 barrels annually, which translates to $4.9 million saved every year. And this saved foreign exchange can find its way to you through beneficial programs and projects. Because Wigton Wind Farm is working to secure Jamaica's future.